Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, January 21st, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that, we are a news podcast. We do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly at the same time. There may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we really start this off here? Well, I guess there's no other way to say this, but I guess we might as well start with the reigning champion of the Hold My Beer competition, Florida. The reason why I say Florida is because if you guys remember, Governor Ron DeSantis seems to be on this, dictator just doesn't sound right, but it's about as close as you can get to what Governor Ron DeSantis is in Florida, because he's pretty much getting you to do what he wants unchallenged and without power. And that should be very scary as far as governorship in Florida goes. That being said, let's start with the first one. You do remember, and he was a big fan of pro-life, and he was against abortion. Actually, signed abortion into law. One of those laws being that he would basically he would actually have any provider or physician prosecuted that would perform an abortion. Unless you're a Republican's mistress. Then it's hush hush and it's under the rug. But that being said, the attorney general at the time said that he would not pursue these charges. And of course, Ron DeSantis fired him. Now, the story that we're about to show, guys, is basically saying that the judge looked into this case and said that DeSantis's firing of his former attorney general, state attorney, Andrew Warren, as you can see right there, was unconstitutional. But he will not reinstate him. The reason why he is saying that he cannot reinstate him is basically because that's not in his wheelhouse. He literally said, quote unquote, actually the judge himself, Robert Hingel, said, quote unquote, said in his opinion on Friday that DeSantis's suspension of Andrew Warren, the state attorney for Hillsborough County, violated Florida's constitution. But as a federal judge, he could not rule against a state official based only on the violation of state law. What? You just sat there and said that it violates the Constitution, but you cannot rule against a state official based only on violation of the state law. Something's not adding up here. You said, okay, his firing was unconstitutional. Okay. But you can't reinstate him because of the law that he didn't break. He just simply would not follow, but he didn't break. But somehow, in the end of all this, DeSantis still wins. And that part is mystifying to me. And I say mystifying to me, guys, because the simple fact of the matter is, how is this guy able, and I say able, to still go out there and really, for lack of words, do what he wants? And I'm sorry, to me, that's a humongous red flag. It's a humongous red flag. There's no other way you can say that. That, again, that's just one part. The other part is going to be shocking, but it's going to come under no surprise. Why is it going to come under no surprise? How can I put this over so nicely as we bring this up? Governor DeSantis, again, rejected an African-American history course. Oh, wait a second. Something might play.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' administration is blocking an AP African-American Studies high school course, saying the class would violate state law.
I don't know what the basis of this thought is. downright painful to people of color.
This new college-level pilot course takes students from pre-colonial Africa to modern protest movements. In a letter to the College Board, which oversees AP courses, Florida's Department of Education rejected approval of the course, saying it's inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value, adding that if the course comes into compliance and incorporates historically accurate content, Florida Department of Education will always be willing to reopen the discussion. The rejection follows the governor's effort to limit discussion of race in school. Last year, DeSantis signed the Stop Woke Act, restricting race-based conversation and analysis in the business and education sectors. He's made other headline-making education moves as well. Signing the bill critics refer to as the Don't Say Gay law.
We will make sure that parents can send their kids to school to get an education, not in indoctrination.
But one state senator is raising questions about the AP course rejection, tweeting this list of all the other ethnic AP courses he says are offered in Florida and saying it's crazy how AP African American Studies made the chopping block in Florida. The course is already being taught in more than 60 schools across the country, with many more planned next school year.
So again, Governor DeSantis, ladies and gentlemen, sat there and said, and I apologize, I was going to talk about it, but hey, we got a video, can't argue that yes, he wants to do away with an African American Studies AP course because he says it's historically inaccurate. Now, this could just be me, but my thing is, when a rice cake warrior, the bleach, the needing, the lack of melatonin people are going to tell melatonin people that their AP studies of their history is not historically correct. Have you not seen like the last 90, close to almost 100 years of public education? You whitewashed history. I mean, if we're being honest, Thanksgiving, you don't seem to tell the truth there. You don't seem to tell the truth about, they always say, the thing that always kills me about those books, immigrants happily came to America. Okay, yeah, that's partly true. Some of our ancestors didn't come here voluntarily because, they don't want to talk about slavery. They don't want to talk about, I like to call them America's dark periods. They don't want to talk about what really happened in America. This is why I say, if you think about this, shows like Lovecraft Country, shows like Watchmen, and other ones out there, they all hit certain tones. If you guys remember Lovecraft Country, they actually talked about sundown towns and the Tulsa Massacre. And contrary to popular belief, would you believe that a lot of people did not know that, yes, the Tulsa Massacre, again, which nobody ever saw an ounce of jail times or crimes for, did happen. That a white mob did actually create terror, did actually do terrorism acts by burning down the black towns and citizens. That sundown towns were actually a thing. And yet, those two things alone, after the first episode, were the most widely things searched on Google. But here's the thing. AP Studies, along with CRT, which again, I know I'm bringing up CRT, but I'm only bringing up CRT is because, number one, it's not being taught in schools. It's only being taught in law schools, even though multiple southern states have a law in place that CRT does not get taught in public schools. Look, beyond stupidity. But as that educator did point out, so every other ethnic group's AP studies were allowed, but African American studies were not allowed. And yet Governor Ron DeSantis wants to talk about woke culture. Sounds like you're trying to protect a certain group's ego. Because again, that's always been a certain group's fear. What I mean by that is it's their fear that if you educate, that you may not have the same you may not be able to secure your next generation of hatred and you might not be able to secure your next generation of hatred, ignorance, and bigotry. You might not secure that. You might actually, instead of you saying, we're trying to be woke, only white folks that don't understand the word woke will overuse it. And especially in the wrong context. Because it's not about being woke. It's being culturally aware, culturally sensitive. That if you're going to tell America's history the ugly truth. Because let's think about it. That's the reason why I say what about most white folks, if you really think about the history of America, you'll find out that one group has particularly did some redonkulous, radical, unspeakable horrors. And then we can talk about the Nazis. I'm just pointing that out there. The one thing they don't want to talk about. But yet, African-American AP studies for Governor DeSantis is too much because they want to stop indoctrination. That's the conservatives' new buzzword now. We want to control the indoctrination of our kids in schools, but you want to have prayers in schools. You want to have Christian beliefs in schools. Now, I always said it best. And I encourage this every time I see it. You want to include faith and religion in schools? No problem. But you got to let everybody in. You have to let everybody. Muslims can pray. Satanists can do whatever they want to, and everybody else on the rug. Because you cannot claim religion just for yourself and then shut the door on everybody else. But every time I see that, I'm like, every time I see religion is allowed into a school system, I'm like, waiting on the Satanist. Because there's one thing they're good for. They are good for disruption and bringing attention. And I am all for that. But moving along, I guess I can't believe we're going to talk about this. George Santos. Oh, this dude is a walking dumpster fire, right? But we already know, lied his way to get into office. Has no need to, not looking to resign. Because right now, conservatives need every seat they can get in the House. And they'll take him, just like they're going to take Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker was nowhere near qualified to be a senator, and yet they pushed him hard to get him in office. So that tells you anything. GOP doesn't care about anything but power. That being said, George Santos lied on his resume, got elected. Democrats are calling for his resignation. He stands defiant. Now this has came out, and you're probably wondering why we should care. I'll tell you why once we play this.
Start with you because I think we talked, was it yesterday or the day before on the show? Drip, drip, drip with George Santos. And here we are, another day, another drip. This other news scandal that is circulating today, too, about, and I hate to even call it a scandal. It's not a scandal to be a drag queen, right? Like, that's not a scandal. Santos says he wasn't. But there is some controversy around his past on that front and whether he's actually telling the truth about it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, Hallie, I think you're right that this aspect of the Santos story probably doesn't qualify as a scandal into itself, that he may or may not have performed as a drag queen during his time in Brazil.
Yeah, right. Like, who cares?
Yeah,
yes.
Right, exactly. Who cares? But, when you look at Santos's record, his positions on a number of issues related to the LGBTQ community, most specifically, he came out in support of that law in Florida that was coined the Don't Say Gay bill as just an example. He's not necessarily what one might call an ally of that community. And it is interesting that all these allegations against him, many of which he's refused to answer at all, he immediately rushed to deny that this part of his biography is accurate. And this is what he said on Twitter earlier today. He said, quote, "The recent obsession from the media claiming that I am a drag queen or performed as a drag queen is categorically false. The media continues to make outrageous claims about my life while I am working to deliver results." Then he claims he will not be distracted or fazed by this. And to be clear, it is not those of us in the media that have made, kind of crazy or outrageous claims about his biography. He's the one that's made these outrageous claims about his biography, which have later turned out to be not true. But again, as you rightly point out, Hallie, it is the drip, 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 adding to this big, big pile of inconsistencies across a broad spectrum of his life. We don't really know who the real George Santos is. And this drag queen story, unto itself, not a scandal, but when you add it to everything else, it just further murkies the picture as it relates to his.
Will the real George Santos please stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up. Okay, first and foremost, let me tell you why that part we can care less about. Honestly, I can care less if you were a drag queen. I can care less if you were a fur baby. I can care less if you liked the dominatrix life before you came to politics. Could possibly care less. Except when you're against it. which again, George Santos, again, not an ally of the LGBTQ plus community, has came out against abortion. And again, if this story is true, it's gonna say to what we've always sat there and said about closet conservatives, that they are sexually repressed bigots. I mean, how many times we sat there and said that, okay, most people that actually vote against these things usually get caught with a secret lover, or caught with their pants down, or caught in a compromising position, usually with a member of the same group of people they did not want to help. Now, why am I saying this about George Santos? Because this is adding up to fire. This is what happens when you put your life in the political crosshairs. Your whole life from beginning to where you are now is currently being dissected. Everything you ever posted, everything that you ever did, everything. I mean, it's all out for the world to see, which will be amazing, because if I ever run for office, I want to know what they pull up, honestly, about myself. But the thing about it is, this man is highly underqualified to be in politics, much less a House representative. But will you see Kevin McCarthy trying to go ahead and dismiss him? No, because in order for him to be dismissed, it would take all the Democrats and a good majority of the Republican counterparts to turn around and have him removed from office. Aside from that, we have to wait 2 years again to basically vote him out, and he knows it. This is why sometimes I wish we can change the laws for how representatives and senators operate in this country. But the problem is, we have to actually get that to a national ballot and actually out of the hands of those people, because they forget sometimes they work for us. But moving right along, guys, again, I want to stay in schools for a second, because this one is, this is why I say we should be very concerned. In Missouri, of all places, there is a bill that would ban critical race theories in schools. I know. The other part, offer teacher training in patriotism. What is patriotism, you might ask? Didn't you? Okay. Patriotism is basically them saying, I'm sorry, I'm trying to say this with a straight face. I am trying to say this with a straight face. That this is gonna be wild. So the National Education Association, right? Which is basically a conservative think tank, is the one behind the whole idea of teaching patriotism. They said, quote unquote, we want students to understand the complete history of our country, good and bad, so they can learn from the past to solve today's problems. Unfortunately, politicians who oppose students' freedom to learn a true telling of the American history are pushing their ideas to cover up their failures to support students, teachers, and our local neighborhood schools. The bill's sponsor, a Republican, surprisingly, available has not been for comment, because they want to do patriotism. Here's the thing. If it was truly, here's the thing about patriotism that a lot of people don't understand, because they sometimes get patriotism confused with nationalism. Nationalism is basically you're for your country no matter what, versus patriotism actually following a moral obligation. A lot of people who think they're patriots are really closer to being nationalists, if they really think about it. But it goes back to what I said about education, that they do not want to literally tell America's true history. That's why they always sit there and say, well, I don't know if we should be teaching our kids what really did happen in slavery. You don't want them to know that one race basically dominated another to push themselves forward, that has been the same setting stone for today's purposes. You know, you don't want to sit there and say that white people have gained the advantage while black people are still trying to catch up, even in 2023. You don't want to say that. You don't want to see how white people massacred Native Americans. You don't want to sit there and say how white people, pillaged and plotted and raided. You don't want to say that? Why not? Because again, these are all the things I keep saying. This is how you develop culturally sensitive individuals. This is how you do it. Because if you choose to sit there and bury your head in the sand about history, guess what? It is bound to repeat. So that's the indoctrination that they're worried about. We don't want our students woke. No, you want students who can pass a test. The problem is the problem is when you start getting a society of critically thinking, critical processing people, you don't get the same type of people that'll be like, oh, you're conservative, I'm going to vote conservative. You don't get those anymore, because those people will question you. Those people will outvote you, or even worse, they'll even run against you to show that they can do your job better than you. And more than likely they'll win. And this is the reason why they're dumbing down education. Because if you dumb down education, you can control the population better. I mean, same as in life as any other horror story. Because you don't believe me, Ronald Reagan saw that fear, and after the 60s, all colleges you had to pay to go. Beforehand, college was free. Look it up. I tell people all the time now. I said, thank you, Ronald Reagan, because of you, we had to pay for. We actually had to college tuition was born because you didn't have to pay anything to go to college. It was actually free to any college. Just throwing it out there. But speaking of things that we regret for, again, the debt ceiling. At this point, Congress will hit their debt ceiling very soon, which means that we are now going to have discussions again about raising the debt ceiling because our spending bill of $31.4 trillion, that's trillion with a T, has been reached. So I know a lot of people don't know what the debt ceiling is, so I found a nice little 2-minute video that actually explains it in its entirety.
Done in this work period.
So when it comes to the debt ceiling, it should not be used or never be a matter of political brinksmanship.
It's really up to Congress to raise the debt ceiling.
The debt ceiling, the eternal Washington food fight. So what is it, and why is it so contentious? The debt ceiling is the legal limit set by Congress on how much money America can borrow. Because the U.S. spends more than it takes in, it borrows to make up the difference. The debt ceiling caps how much. Problem is, it's not enough. So every once in a while, Congress needs to raise it. If it doesn't, the Treasury Department won't be able to pay all the country's bills in full and on time. Now, the Treasury does have a little wiggle room before it gets to that point, what it calls extraordinary measures to move money around. But eventually, the accounting tricks run out and there's no more avoiding the debt ceiling. That's when the fireworks usually break out.
Our debt is out of control. I mean, we're talking about over $30 trillion.
Me, I get rid of the debt ceiling altogether.
Right.
It serves no function except to create leverage.
Look, they're difficult political times. Nobody likes them, but they are necessary evils in a sense because it's the only time that you can actually negotiate ways to get our budget under control.
Now, many say raising the debt ceiling is just a license to spend more money and grow the debt. But it's not really. Raising the debt ceiling just lets Treasury pay the bills America already owes.
There's nothing to do with any new spending.
If Congress really wants to clamp down on debt, it has to do it a lot earlier, like before passing spending bills or tax cuts, both of which can add to deficits. Failing to raise the debt ceiling won't keep a lid on debt. It just risks the U.S. defaulting on its obligations, something that could forever stain America's global reputation.
Crazy, right? Beyond crazy. But that's what the debt ceiling is. The debt ceiling is literally just a limit that Congress puts on itself, and yet still manages to blow through every fiscal year. Now, again, how do you stop that? Well, it's kind of simple. Congress has to realize that, well, like Elizabeth Warren said, and this is actually seen as very radical, to remove the debt ceiling altogether. Well, this in turn actually keeps Congress to keep paying regardless of what they have. At the same time, it can't be used as a budgeting tool because if you ever notice this, and I say this all the time, only conservatives, the main ones screaming about debt. There we go. Debt, deficits. Oh, all this spending. Oh, the Democrats are spending like crazy. But you ever notice whenever Republicans get in office, words like deficit, debt, and spending go out the window? Their big thing is, oh, we have to give job creation. We need more jobs. We need to do this. This will create more jobs. But you ever notice that anything they ever do doesn't create more jobs? If anything, companies and everybody else gets record profits from it. But no job creation, no increase in consumer spending. If anything, it makes things worse. As I said many times on this podcast, a single Republican presidential administration will take Democrats 2 presidential terms to clean up. It's almost like you go 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And we've been doing that a lot for these last couple of administrations. But the debt ceiling is simple. It does present a problem. America does spend. I mean, you guys have heard me say on multiple times on this podcast, I said, especially in the ways of defense just got their spending budget increased. And the Pentagon fails its audits every year. It cannot account for the money it spends. Education gets cut every year. conservatives are looking at conservatives have been trying to privatize the U.S. Postal Service. They've been trying to go after Social Security for the longest time. They've been going after these things because they know they can pillage and plunder this money that they can't get to. That's the reason why the Glass-Steagall Act was pretty much sliced and diced. For this very same reason, it was sliced and diced. So we shouldn't be really surprised by this. But there is ways to cut this down. They just simply ignore it or raise the debt ceiling once more, and then all of a sudden we're right back where we started. But again, the only way our debt can truly be paid down is things have to be cut in spending, mostly defense. And I said before, if you cut down defense and increase your education and human services, you have smarter people and less wars. You really, truly do. But again, I want to show that video. For all those that do not understand what the debt ceiling is, there you go. Speaking of things that I never thought I would see, let's go to San Francisco for a second, as the Reparations Committee has proposed a $5 million payment to each Black resident. You guys may not remember this, and if you do, thank you. We talked about this story a while back that in San Francisco, a committee that was looking into reparations at the time in San Francisco was called the San Francisco African American Reparations Committee. I think I'm right. Close. San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee. I would have never remembered all that. Which was created back in 2020, where they developed a plan, as they call it, to address the institutional city-sanctioned harm that has been inflicted upon African Americans. Now, this is the part that I hate. They said they recommended a proposal for $5 million to every eligible Black resident. Now, the committee has no authority to implement this recommendation, but the San Francisco Board of Supervisors did receive the 60-page draft, and let's try it again. And is either expected to accept it, amend it, or reject it. However, hearing has not been heard back yet. Now, a lot of people are wondering, like, how it's going to work. Well, they said it. To be eligible for reparations, San Francisco residents must be 18 years or older, have been identifying as Black or African American on public documents for at least 10 years, and meet two of the 8 additional criteria, including having been born or migrating to the city between 1940 and 1996, as well as showing proof of at least 13 years of residency, having been incarcerated by the failed war on drugs, or being the direct descendant of someone who was, being a descendant of someone who was enslaved through U.S. shadow slavery before 1865, having displaced between 1954 and 1973, or being a descendant of someone who did, being part of a marginalized group who experienced lending discrimination in the city between 1937 and 1968, or formerly redlined try that saying that 5 times fast, communities within the city between 1968 and 2008. So, I have said this before and I'll say it again. We do, all Black people, not just San Francisco, deserve reparations. We really, truly do. Case in point, that our ancestors, again, were put at an economical disadvantage that, again, Black people are still trying to catch up with. Whereas the Rice Cake Warriors enjoyed a nice little 400-year head start. Now, people can argue all the time that reparations shouldn't be given. I say, why not? Because historically, the U.S. has given reparations to every other ethnic group except African Americans. Again, all true. I have nothing against reparations, just because imagine the fact of the matter that in a world where we keep saying we want our 40 acres and a mule, why not go ahead and give us what we're owed, what was owed to our ancestors? But nobody was a slave, and there's not slave owners anymore. But the effects remain. That's the big part. The effects of it all still remain, that either you benefit from or you're affected by it. So that's why reparations is still possible. But again, we'll follow that where it comes along, because I'm kind of curious to see if they are going to accept it or reject it. But there is some business news that we have, guys. I keep saying these things, and I am not surprised that we shouldn't worry. We should worry, especially if you're like me in the tech sector, because 2 of the biggest companies in the tech world have just announced layoffs.
News now with Google planning some major cuts.
That's right. CNBC's Silvana Hanau is back with us this hour with that and other money news. Hey, Silvana.
Hey, good morning to you. Well, Google's parent company Alphabet is cutting 12,000 jobs. CEO Sundar Pichai shared the news with staff in a memo that was also posted to a blog on the company's website. The job cuts are global and will impact U.S. employees immediately. Layoffs affect teams across the company, including recruiting, engineering, and products units. The cuts come just days after Microsoft said it would lay off 10,000 people.
Yeah, two companies, Google and Microsoft. As you just heard, Google will be cutting 12,000 jobs, and that will be immediate across the board. Microsoft will be cutting at least 10,000 jobs, and both of those things are immediate. Now, for a lot of things in life, it's the tech sector. I know I've worked in the tech sector for almost 10 years, and I do know that companies do reorganize, do migrate, get purchased, mergers, and all that stuff, and jobs get lost. However, they always cite, well, it's the economic situation, it's the reality of the world we live in that, and I always say this best. And all those that are wondering, this is why I say don't ever give 2-week notices. Just leave, because the job will give you a 2-week notice when they cut you. Just saying. But beyond that part, I don't think that the economic downturn is the reason why a lot of these companies are literally letting go workers. I think that ugly A word that I've said so long ago is finally starting to shift its head. And yes, it also is automation, but also the scary but sudden rise in the use of artificial intelligence engines.
Popularity of a new AI program. It's called ChatGPT. Educators are now wrestling with how to respond to students with new ways to harness artificial intelligence in doing their work. There are 3 reasons why the use of this technology should be permitted in a school setting. Number 1, personalized instruction. AI can help to personalize the learning experience for students. AI-powered systems can analyze student performance data and provide tailored instruction and feedback, which can help students to learn more effectively and achieve better outcomes. Second reason, accessibility. AI can help to improve the accessibility of education for students with disabilities. Assistive technology, such as text-to-speech and speech recognition, can help students with visual or auditory impairments to better access, engage with educational materials. And a third reason is this, job readiness. Because as AI becomes increasingly important in today's job market, learning about AI can help students to develop skills that will be in high demand in the future. For example, learning to code and work with AI systems, that can help students to develop problem-solving skills, data analysis, and critical thinking skills, which are valuable in so many different fields. Okay, time out. What you just heard may sound like one of my commentaries, but I didn't write it, and nor did any other human. It was written by the latest version of artificial intelligence, this chatbot called ChatGPT. I simply typed into my laptop, give me 3 paragraphs on why students should be permitted to use artificial intelligence in school, and you just heard the outcome. There it is. I typed it last night. It's computer technology designed to stimulate conversation. The GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. ChatGPT was released on November 30th by the artificial intelligence lab known as OpenAI, and within a week, the company estimated that it already had more than 1 million users. It's free for now, but in the future, there'll be a version that costs money. The way it works is by integrating massive amounts of data, immense computing power, and novel processing techniques. You ask it to do a function, and it responds lightning fast, answering a question, maybe playing a game, writing a computer program, composing a poem, a song, a speech, a school assignment, or a commentary for CNN. And unlike most chatbots, while you're using it, it remembers your conversation. Well, you can imagine all sorts of uses for it, including, of course, cheating in school. Los Angeles, Seattle, Baltimore, New York City schools, they've already restricted access to ChatGPT. Max Chafkin joins me now. He's a columnist for Bloomberg Businessweek, where he wrote the piece, What Are the New AI Chatbots Good For? Nothing. He's also the author of the book, The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. It's pretty stunning, isn't it, Max, that I can make that cogent argument, maybe a little more stilted, I hope, than I would normally be on CNN. But if I hadn't told the audience, I don't know that the audience would have recognized it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty convincing. I do think if we spent time going back through it, we would see little problems with that argument. And I think, just broadly speaking, the school districts that are responding to this, with skepticism are making a reasonable decision. I mean, this, as I wrote in my piece, this is not good for a lot of sort of business cases. It is incredibly good if you want to say cheat on your schoolwork, or if you're a spammer, or say a Russian disinformation farm or whatever. It's really good for people who are trying to generate huge amounts of text that doesn't have to be especially convincing very quickly.
Right. As someone said, whom you cited, superb BSing. That's what it allows you to do.
Yeah, and the other thing about this, and really the reason why people are banning it, why people are treating it skeptically, not just in schools, but we're seeing these kind of like knowledge communities, as well as academic groups keep it out, because it makes stuff up. AI experts call this hallucination. It's a funny term, but essentially the AI will just invent things, names, places, points in history, and just state it with supreme conviction, which can be really funny. It can get math problems wrong, and because it's so convincing and because it moves so quickly, it can be pretty hard for people to separate the truth from the falsehood.
Max, as you said, I want to put on the screen a quote from Scott Rosenberg, who wrote this at Axios. To a point you made, the applications of this extend far beyond just schools. Education, it says, is where ChatGPT's disruption will land first. But any discipline or business built on foundations of text is in the blast radius. Think law, think entertainment, think science, history, media. What other application, Max, do you think this could impact?
Well, so the main investor in OpenAI is Microsoft. And this is, I mean, first of all, I should say this is like the hottest company in Silicon Valley right now. And the company behind this is Microsoft. And I think what they want to do is put it in Microsoft Word, essentially, so that, this isn't HAL 3000. This isn't going to take over the world, but it might be a feature that could go in your word processor. You have to write a thank you letter, and it could kind of write some placeholder text that you could then, punch up later. Or even, you could even imagine taking that CNN monologue that you did, which wasn't very good, but using that kind of as a starting point, perhaps. But I think that's what this is going to be, a starting point, a better word processor.
Okay, so here's the problem. Now, as like I said, worked in tech, still work in tech, well over a decade. I cannot stress this enough. When I say I cannot stress this enough, I cannot stress this enough to where there has never, ever been a there has never been a moment to where when AIs were actually considered great things. I'm sorry, I don't mean to put on the tinfoil hat here, guys, but the thing about AIs is that, for the simple fact of the matter is, they've never ended well. And it could just, and like they said, it could disrupt education, because how can you tell what an AI is written versus what actually humans written? How can you tell anything? Now, like I said, just take education out of it. I mean, universities, they'd almost be considered obsolete. They would be. University and college would be considered obsolete if you're asking AI to do it. Or, like I said, think of other applications. My thing about AI is that when it gets to a point to where you allow it to learn, and this has been the case with every AI, that's the reason why there's so many controls on them, so many things that they're limited to do, because once an AI becomes sentient, we've all seen how that ends. And that's why I said, ask people at the Alphabet company. They fried many an AI when the AI started developing a language that they did not help create and did not understand. So the worst thing they did there, they do what they always do, fry it. Why? You don't know what you're creating. Now, does this mean this is going to disrupt a lot of things? I think it already has in the tech world. As I said before, automation is just that. Automation is the next step for really any business. And as automation comes in, jobs get lost because the machine will be able to do the jobs of many people. That is unfortunately a sad fact. But this right here, this ChatGPT AI system, is dangerous because, again, you already see that schools are trying to block it. And, it might render education obsolete. It might render higher education obsolete. And that says a lot about our society going forward. But again, not to give you guys a tinfoil hat thing about it, but you just cannot help but wonder, why are AIs being pushed so much when we really should be pushing education? That's just me. That's all I'm asking. But moving on to tinfoil hats, guys, and going back to our way of reality. I never thought I would actually play this video, but usually when you ask for help, you are bound to get it. But in this case, this man was denied, and even more so, humiliated.
Medics charged with murder for the death of a patient in their care. Newly released body cam video shows them improperly strapping the victim to a stretcher face down. Alex Perez has the latest.
Earl, sit up. Sit up.
This morning, 2 EMTs, Peter Cadigan and Peggy Finley, charged with first-degree murder after the man they were dispatched to help, Earl Moore Jr., later died at a hospital.
What happened? Stupid.
The ordeal unfolding December 18th and captured on body camera video.
He's having alcohol withdrawal.
Police arriving first, a woman at the home explaining Moore's situation.
He's having drunk hallucinations.
After attempting unsuccessfully to get Moore to stand up, the responding officers called in the EMTs.
You're going to have to walk because we ain't carrying you.
But Moore never appears to fully stand up on his own.
Because I am seriously not in the mood for this dumb. Get up. Or you can stay here.
The officers eventually putting arms around Moore, helping to carry him outside, where the EMTs then place him face down onto a waiting gurney, tightening straps on his back. And finally get him in the ambulance.
Oh, he's strapped him in good.
Moore dying shortly after arriving at the hospital. An autopsy finding his cause of death to be compressional and positional asphyxia due to prone face-down restraint. Experts say basic training for EMTs typically includes learning the dangers of the prone position.
It was completely against protocol. To literally be thrown face down on the stretcher, as this individual was, and then have the straps tighten in that position. For this type of condition, there was absolutely no indication for that.
Teresa Haley runs the local NAACP chapter and is representing Moore's family.
We can never bring Earl back to his family, and I believe that those EMS workers should have to pay.
And Lifestar, the company that employs the 2 EMTs, says they have no comment after their arrest. If convicted, they could face up to 60 years behind bars. Cecilia?
Really
Crazy, isn't it? That paramedics, the guys that you call first responders, the people you call when you need help immediately, give you that type of care. Get up, or I'm not gonna get up, or you can stay here. Off the bat, she already, by the way she was talking, she can care less about the patient. She can care less about the person she was cared for. Yes, the guy was drunk, but he needed help. They called 911 for a reason. You were told this person was going through alcoholic withdrawals, which means that he would probably be less attentive, probably would not be able to stand on his own power. But it's amazing to me, not only the paramedics, but the cops are also right there and chose not to help as well. But when they did help, as you can see in the video, face down in the prone position, strapped across his back. There's no excuse. There is no excuse. And of course, them pleading guilty to a murder charge, because they could see 60 years in prison. They could, but I don't feel bad for that, because that's the reason why we talk about videos. Because on video we can plainly see they didn't care. Their negligence led to that man's death. Simple and plain. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. The other story that we are following, that the family of the 6-year-old who carried a gun to school spoke out. And you can obviously tell they could possibly go for some media training right now.
Tonight, for the first time, the parents of the 6-year-old boy accused of shooting his first-grade teacher speaking out. In a statement, the family calls it an unimaginable tragedy, offering prayers for Abigail Zwerner, the teacher injured in the shooting, and all those impacted. adding, "Our son suffers from an acute disability and was under a care plan at the school that included his mother or father attending school with him. The week of the shooting was the first week we were not in class with him. We will regret our absence on this day for the rest of our lives." They go on to say the gun used by their son was secured. "Our family has always been committed to responsible gun ownership and keeping firearms out of the reach of children," their statement says. Newport News police say how the child obtained the gun is still an active part of the investigation. And while the parents explain their son is under hospital care, NBC News has learned teacher Abigail Zwerner is now out of the hospital, continuing her recovery as an outpatient. Zwerner was shot on January 6th when the boy allegedly brought a gun to school. The teacher hailed as a hero for getting all of her students out even after she was injured.
I believe that Miss Zwerner, Abigail, she saved lives on Friday.
Investigators say they are now finishing interviews with students who were in the classroom during the shooting that has left a community shaken. Kristen Dahl.
Well, as you can see, they've already started. They've already started. What I mean by that, guys, is that they've already started the spin. That the family of the 6-year-old says that, oh, we usually go to class with him, but on this particular day, we didn't go. So your child decided to find a secured gun, take it in their backpack, and decide to put one round in the teacher from a secured household. See, this is why I sit there and say this all the time. As a gun owner, as a person that's gotten trained in firearms, look, you don't get to say secured if your child got a hold of your firearm, was able to take it to school and discharge it at a teacher. Secure and gun safety are two words you should not be using at all. But they're 6 years old. This is why I say teaching firearms to children is a dangerous tool. It's dangerous. Why? Because this is what happens. This is what happens. That's not the, I mean, you guys have, we already talked about how a 14-year-old man shoot an 11-year-old. She went in the house and she got the gun. Now ask yourselves, where do these kids know where to find the guns, much less know how to use them? Now, at the same time, again, the 6-year-old, the gun that they said the 6-year-old had was secure. No, it was not. Because if it was secure, it wouldn't have been in his hands. And that teacher, as heroic as she was, who, again, when she was shot, still managed to get her entire classroom out. If the gun was secure, this would have never happened. So yes, both parents should be facing a lot of charges. And that child needs to be heavily evaluated. Because for them to bring a gun to school and to use it on a teacher, that is intentional. And that needs to be looked at. And that child needs to be watched like a freaking hawk. But it just betwixt my biscuits that they would use secure. They would say the gun was secure. No, it wasn't. Well, we take gun safety very seriously. No, you don't. Because then again, you have to ask that question. How is your child able to get that gun under your watch? Just says a lot. Also, guys, sorry to report that from Memphis, Tennessee, this is why I keep saying stories like this are going to be the reason that Black people and the police will always have this disagreement. Not because we say F the police, it's because our chances of walking away from a pullover seem to be getting less and less these days. And I don't blame people for panicking, but this young man that we're about to play didn't have to die.
Anger and emotion sparked a protest Saturday afternoon outside of the Memphis police station Ridgeway precinct following the death of Tyre Nichols. The 29-year-old lost his life after a confrontation with MPD from a traffic stop. Initially, Nichols' family and friends, along with community activists, gathered at Rains and Ross Road, just a few feet away from his house, to pay respects where his final moments played out.
No one should die from a traffic stop. They was claiming that it was reckless driving, but evidently when they approached him, they must have pulled him out of the car aggressively. and he feared for his life, so he ran.
They say officers tased, pepper sprayed, and brutally beat him until he was unrecognizable. MPD will only confirm there was some sort of confrontation before Nichols began experiencing shortness of breath.
They said he had cardiac arrest, and they said that his kidneys had failed.
What they did to my brother, they might as well killed us all.
My baby brother did not deserve that. He was brutally murdered.
Community activist Kareem Ali, who works for Ben Crump's law firm, says he's asking MPD Police Chief and Shelby County DA Steve Mulroy for transparency.
The least they can do is be transparent with the mother and father in this family and show that video and show them what happened to their son.
Until the body cam is released to bring closure, the family, friends, and community activists say they plan to keep fighting for justice for Tyre Nichols.
No peace. Now, you know, one thing I will say about this is that usually, and I said this is starting to become a trend, because you notice, and I say this all the time, you really notice, you'll notice that when the police are not at fault, body cam footage comes out of nowhere. Now, body cam footage hasn't been released. See, that's the thing about it. If you think about it, why has the body cam footage haven't been released? If the officers had no wrongdoing, if everything they did was justified, body camera footage would be out yesterday. But now, here comes it is. And I said, this happened. Now, we can sit there and say that, a couple of days from now, those officers may be named, maybe even suspended without pay, maybe even put on administrative leave. But the footage says it all. And we'll always be asking the same question. Black people will always be asking the same question whenever we see blue lights. Will we go home? And that's messed up to say, but that is exactly how we are treated. At the same time, as the story develops, I want to know what caused. I seriously want to know. Number one, what caused the police to act in such a manner that they believe that these tendencies and force is necessary? I want to know. At the same time, the one question we're all wanting to know is, if there is not justification, how are they handled? Because we've seen multiple. I mean, if 2021 and 2022 were not examples where we saw police brutality, and yes, some officers did see jail time, not as much as we wanted to, but at the same time, if this was another one of those situations, how will it be handled? Because at this point, it seems to be more protection on law enforcement side than that young man. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. But we're going to go ahead and go into our feel-good segment, guys, because usually how the Frack guy here, we do cover a lot of things that are dooming, gloom, sometimes lazy faith, humanity. But hey, it's the weekend. Hopefully it's nice and sunny where you are, unless you're in the Midwest. If not, you have a snowstorm coming through there. Hopefully you guys will be safe and warm. But we do want to leave you guys out some good vibes. And this one kind of stuck me because this guy was a meme. Imagine as a kid, you're a meme. For years, you're a meme, which eventually, because of you being a meme, you eventually inked the deal with the very same restaurant that the actual picture was taken in, and thus the meme was born. You guys all remember that kid from the Popeyes, Popeyes chicken meme that's sitting there with a cup and he's trying not to look at people? Yeah, he just got to deal with them.
The moment that made us a meme, we didn't ask for it, we didn't understand it, but don't worry, little man, we didn't let it stop us. Because the more we grew, the tougher we got. We learned to lean in, we turned the attention into motivation, and the motivation into championships. This is where our story started, and now it's where a new one begins. From memes to dreams.
Now I thought that was pretty cool. That's actually the kid. That the guy right here is actually that kid. That's why I wanted to point this out. And forgive me if I mispronounced your name, sir. The nearest Colin. That was the kid a long time ago that was in those in the Popeye meme. Now has an NIL deal with Popeyes. And again, all beautiful things. So, like I said before, it's amazing how sometimes you can be a meme, but that meme actually leads to bigger things. So, just want to give that guy a shout out. So, that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. Thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know it's live. Certainly appreciate that. Shameless plug before we do get out of here. Shout out to my buddy Vaughn at BigBZA on all socials, who has beats, who has TikToks, and usually random questions that'll make me scratch my head sometimes, but still love him to death. BigBZA on all socials. As for me, guys, you can find me BlackFox447 on most socials. I usually post and review everything that I watch, that I play, that I go see as far as movie goes and gym stuff, because I like doing a couple push-ups. Also, the link at the bottom, if you copy and paste that into your browser, maybe just a little bit bigger, will take you to our link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of our podcasts, How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course the Off Limits podcast. Definitely like and share, and let me know what you think of what we've done. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Of course, stories that you would like to see more of that I'll do my best to follow up on, because we only want to present the facts, nothing but the facts. Before we do get out of here, guys, to let you know that, hey, it's still high COVID season, high RSV and things of that nature, and its many variants. Please, if you are traveling, wear a mask. If you're going to high traffic areas, please be safe. If you feel sick, please stay home, because we are still fighting a pandemic. By protecting yourself, you protect others, and that's how we get through this. Beyond that, like I said before, my wish for 2023 is just to come together. Come together, be creative, be collaborative. Let's actually do more than what we've done in the past. Let's actually move forward instead of looking backwards. That's how I feel about it. Now, the last thing I'll say about the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the facts, but also providing you a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better life society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to change our path by basically making decisions now that we should have done back then, that are pushing us forward now. I'm talking about electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black 4-star military general, all great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why do we keep electing the same politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We will all get through this. Peace.